Events. I am Greg. I'm joined by the great man, Saif Khan himself. Good morning, Saif.
Hey, everyone. Good morning.
How's it going down there in Houston, mate? Tell me about some projects that you've been tinkering with in the garage.
Oh, okay. Well, right now I've actually been building a nightstand based on Kristen's request. So we're trying to create some, unique nightstands with some technology integration into it, things like that. So that's what I'm doing.
Like, is that furniture, a nightstand with some technology in it?
Yeah, it's a furniture nightstand for her, and it's technology integration for me. I'm trying to put like a wireless charger and some lighting and things like that integrated into it, so that way it's not visible, but it's still there and things like that. So that's what I've been working on.
Could we spin this off and sell this to Facebook as part of that light apparatus that they've got that Mark Zuckerberg invented for his wife?
No, it's not like that.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into it. So I think you're going to share a presentation, right? So let me know when you're. Awesome. So for everyone on the line, thanks for joining. We hope this is going to be informative for everyone. Please use the Just Ask tool to ask us questions as we go throughout today's conversation and presentation. We'll do our best to stop in the moment and answer those questions. For today, we're going to be talking about a product that we worked on and a business called mTrigger. mTrigger is so I think if you want to skip ahead, we can jump into those slides. So mTrigger came to us a few years back, and software was asked to work on a mobile application, but as you see within this picture, the project was a little more detailed than just a mobile application. It was actually a medical device connected through some Bluetooth technology to a mobile app that helped with patient rehabilitation. Today, we're just going to take you through a little bit about the client, a little bit about the project, some of the challenges that we saw, how we solved the problems the client was having. We'll talk a little bit about the technology that we worked on, and then some learnings for everyone that's on the call. As always, our Sales Up series is designed to empower you guys to have conversations with potential clients or third parties, or if you're working on marketing initiatives, we want to give you more ammunition and more information to be able to talk about our capabilities and successes, and present software as you go about bringing awareness to the brand. So a little bit about mTrigger. So I mentioned before, they're in the healthcare space. It was actually a project that we worked on for over a year, and not just healthcare, but more specifically, the project focused around medical devices and mobile applications. We worked with two entrepreneurs that were partners that had formed the business, mTrigger LLC. Brian was a successful investor and business owner in the medical healthcare field, and Russ was a practicing director of physical rehabilitation for the University of Texas. Our application was to be used by patients that were either recovering from surgery or recovering from an injury, and really anything where there was a muscle problem or a focus on improving muscle memory, muscle movement, muscle strength, muscle growth. Our app tied into their business, which was designed to help improve the rehabilitation process. In that year that we worked with the client, we generated approximately $115,000 in revenue. And yeah, Saif, anything to add around that background? I know you worked with Honey and a few of the other team members quite specifically.
No, nothing. I've got more things to talk about as we get into the solution and dive back into it.
Got it. So what was interesting about this project and the relationship is it's not our typical type of corporate relationship. It was a small startup business that had tried to build some technology and build a product or a medical device, and then came to Softway and sought out our help to help them get their product to market. It was an interesting project and business to work with, where we dealt with a day-to-day project manager that was recently hired, but then we also had co-owners or investors in the business that had the technical expertise, yet were somewhat hands-off. As I mentioned before, one was a practicing physical therapist, so he had a day job. So, and the other co-owner ran other businesses in the healthcare field, so there was some interesting dynamics at play. And as I said, This is a really cool project, I think, not only from a personal perspective or for the folks that work on this project at Softway. When we think about humanity and we think about improving someone's experience with a system or an application, or in this case, a patient's ability to rehab and improve their physical well-being, it's a really interesting project and something that we were quite passionate about, given kind of where Softway is and where we want to go around our values and vision. Moving on a little bit, before we jump too much into the project, I do want to take the time to stop and talk a little bit about the industry they operated in. As we've talked about, we do want to empower you guys, and we are working across a number of different industries. It's important to note that this type of client, and if we're working with any other clients in this space, we should be aware of what's going on in the healthcare industry, whether it's a medical device company, whether it's an insurance company, whether it's a healthcare system or a hospital system. It's important that we're able to be able to speak and understand the challenges, the pain points, or the operational issues that people are going through right now. And obviously, I think when you see kind of some of the details that Saif will walk us through in a little bit, you'll start to see how our project connected to really one of the biggest drivers or one of the biggest changes going on in the healthcare industry. So when we get to this slide, specifically, it's important that we're aware that the healthcare system is undergoing pretty transformative operational and process change at the moment. For a long period of time, the healthcare system has worked in a fee-for-service model, which essentially means you offer a service and you receive a set fee for it. Through re-regulation and organizations looking at changing, we're now moving, and a lot of companies already moved partially to this, to a business model that's more around being paid for value. And you'll hear the term a lot called value-based care. And what that means is health systems and medical companies are now being remunerated or essentially financially incentivized to generate outcomes. And if you think a little bit to Softway's operating principles, it's very much tied in that same way. They want to pay healthcare systems for the value they bring, not necessarily just the service they provide. I'm sure you can draw some dynamics or some connections to how Softway sells itself and how we offer professional services there. So for people pursuing clients in healthcare, working with people that are in or around that space, or even serving healthcare clients, it's important that we're aware that people are going through change in how they operate, how they charge clients, how they provide service, how they focus on customer experience, and how they're rewarded for outcomes. The second thing that we're all starting to see as healthcare patients ourselves, or people that live and work in Houston that has such a big healthcare sector, there's a huge shift towards digital transformation. And this project with mTrigger ties directly to this driver and this change in the industry. Our application that Saif will go into more detail.
Sorry to interrupt. I guess people are looking for the StreamYard link, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, we'll pause that for a second.
Okay. Let me just check. Let me just check.
All right.
Some echo.
So Ashley did leave a note saying that she'd redirected everyone.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep. Sorry about that, guys. We'll continue. So yeah, we were touching on mTrigger with healthcare. Digital transformation and leveraging new technologies is something that we're seeing a lot of organizations within the space invest into and see real value. If you've ever had an opportunity to have a doctor's appointment over the phone on a mobile application, digital transformation. If you've ever received surveys or had post-outpatient experiences through technology or email, digital transformation, digital technologies. mTrigger fell right within that wheelhouse of building mobile applications and leveraging technology and devices in order to improve a patient's outcomes and experience. And then lastly, we're all really well aware of this, but we know all businesses across all sectors are dealing with COVID-19 and the impacts of the pandemic. But when it comes to healthcare, whether that be frontline workers, whether that be leadership, they're operating in a 1 in a million time right now, healthcare organizations, and that has a ripple effect into the service providers within that space. So companies like mTrigger, like insurance companies, they're all being significantly impacted, both from a revenue perspective, from how they run their business day to day, how many beds they staff, what they can and can't do. Elective surgeries have been put off. So there's a real bunch of issues right now for people within the healthcare sector. And whilst mTrigger as a business provides a medical device as part of the physical therapy rehab experience, they are connected to the healthcare industry. And so we have to be aware of that. And we should be cognizant of those things when we start to talk with different healthcare providers in new pursuits or when we market software. And then, so I'm going to stop here for a moment. I'm just going to do a quick check. As I said, if you've just joined, please feel free to put any notes or questions in Just Ask. We will try and answer them as we go. I am going to hand things off here to Saif, and Saif's going to give you guys a little bit of a download on the project. Please do ask questions. I will stop Saif at different points, and we will have some Q&A as we go. Over to you, Saif.
Thank you, Greg. All right, so just going through the project a little bit. I think it's important to understand what we built for them and what this means and why this is a little different than most technology products that we make. So first we have to understand physical rehabilitation. Right? When it comes to, if some of you may have gone through the physical therapy, it takes a lot of efforts, to take patience, and it can be demotivating because depending on how long your physical therapy is, if it's a few weeks, great. If it's not, if it's a few months, then you struggle through it because you don't know how much progress you're making. You don't know where you are in that 0 to 100% of recovery, right? And just because you're putting in effort doesn't mean there's improvement. And patients don't always follow what is asked out of them. So there's all of these challenges when it comes to rehabilitation of and when you're going through physiotherapy. And an example of this would be, this is a project that is very close to me because my dad had to go to physiotherapy after an accident and his foot, and it took him several months to actually be able to get one of his muscle and his leg working again. So the struggle he would have to see, whether he's actually making progress or not making progress is something that I'm able to very closely relate to within this project. If he had a device like this, I think it would have helped him create tremendously in actually, working harder towards it at the same time, mentally being prepared and knowing where he is and how much recovery he's making. So that is what this brings to the patients. It's about showing progress of where you are and how you're recovering, as well as gives you that motivation that you have so much more to go and you're going to get there. So the business of mTrigger is basically, it's patients who have to go through physical rehab, and there is a custom device that is made to actually integrate with a mobile device and provide information. And then you connect this device to your muscle group, and then you're able to start recording information based on the physical therapy or rehabilitation that you're going through. So that is how they've made this business. A lot of athletes, a lot of people who have had injuries or surgeries are basically the patients that are going to be wanting to use this device to help with their recovery. So who does your product benefit? So physical therapists. So this way, the physical therapists are able to see what the patients have been doing when they're away from the doctor's offices, away from the gyms and things like that. And when they come back to the physical therapist and they show them, okay, I've done all of these things. Here's where all the work that I've put into it. The physical therapist can see it on the application. It helps patients because patients are now able to keep track of their progress. They know where they started off at and where they are at and where they need to go in order to get say that they're fully recovered. And overall, it helps the healthcare industry because it is a modern piece of technology that enables patients and actually helps doctors keep costs down, puts patients' health in focus and makes it a priority. And it basically is very encouraging, right? So it's a big boost to the healthcare industry from this standpoint. Then let's talk a little bit about our approach and solution. When it comes to technology solutions, a big part of being able to communicate what that end solution is going to look like is one of the hardest part. When you sit in front of a client and try to tell them, hey, this is what your problem and this is what you're looking to solve, and here's what the technology solution is going to look like. I think you can make you can give a good idea around it, but to get all of the things accurate and for them to imagine what that's going to look like, that is hard. So here we have the benefit of actually looking at what the end product is, and then we'll go back into talking about how we were able to build it out. So I'm going to play a quick video to show you what this application contains and what all it had inside it. So it gives you an idea, and then when you start talking about the details, you'll be able to tie the specific back to the applications over here. Oops. All right, so this is based on the Android application. So when you open up the application, this is where you would see 4 of these different options. The first one is you're going to train, which is actually just seeing how your muscle group is functioning or improving. And then next is going to be track to see how you're progressing. And then the play part is a game actually that you can play while flexing your muscles. In order to do your physiotherapy at the same time, being able to being able to play the game at the same time, actually be able to work on your physiotherapy as well. And the final option was actually going to be the settings. So this is the settings section where it tells you how much time you have spent so far totally and flexing your muscle or relaxing your muscle. Then it allows you to set some settings because everybody's the signal strength that you get from a muscle group could vary for patient to patient. So this is a way to basically change that over here. So from here, what the application goes into is the ability to connect to a Bluetooth device. So you actually start scanning for a Bluetooth device, and it lists out the Bluetooth devices that are in range. So basically, when you see the mTrigger device, you will tap on that, and then it will start connecting to that device. And if there's any settings or anything updates that you have to make, it'll make those. Then it actually goes into the function where you're able to actually track what's happening. So every time you flex your muscle, you will see that this green line will go up and down. So it's a graph that shows the intensity of the signal received from your muscle flexing. And the more healthy your muscle is, or the more flexible it is, the higher the graph is going to be. So that's basically tracking the intensity of the muscle. And this is another view of the same thing where you are able to show how many microvolts of signal are we receiving when actually you're flexing and relaxing. And this is also part of the exercise that the physiotherapist may want you to do. So it tells you when to flex your muscle, when to relax your muscle, and it keeps track of this information and puts it into a graph again, or stores it as a data point within the application for you to revisit in the future. Right, so skipping ahead, we don't have the demo for the game necessarily, but it was, I don't know if you guys have seen this game called Flappy Bird, but it was very similar to that. But instead of you trying to press on the screen, you would use your muscle flexing to actually go up and down using that game, basically. So in essence, how does this work? The patient performs a manual exercise or an activity using the muscle that needs a recovery. The sensor monitors that signal strength from that muscle and then visualizes that data and stores that data within the application. Or it can be played using, can be used in the game to show something visual. So that way the patient is also able to enjoy while they're doing the work of the physiotherapy work. Then a big important piece of this is to understand that this was not just a technology project. It was not just us building out a mobile app like how we've done hundreds of mobile applications in the past. Very quickly into the project, we started realizing we also have to understand bioinstrumentation a little bit, which means that we had to understand how does the human body actually generate these signals, and what are these signals, where do they come from, and how to accurately measure them, and how to basically convert that into something that can be shown on a UI, user interface. So that was a very challenging part of this project, because this was something that we necessarily weren't directly involved in when the project was getting created, but this was something that another third-party company who was building the hardware for the bioinstrumentation was working on. But for us to actively work with this third-party company and build out a solution that the client would need and be happy with, we had to understand this a little bit more to make sure the results that they're getting are accurate. A lot of the times we would say, oh, we've finished the project and it's working, and the client would go use it in the field and say, oh, this is not how it's supposed to work, it's not working. And that is where the disconnect was. So for us to understand this a little bit more about how this bioinstrumentation plays a role in whatever the technology aspect of the mobile application is, I think that is what we had to connect those two things together to actually make it successful. So breaking down the solution, like I mentioned, understanding the electrical signals was key. Then also working with modern IoT technologies where we were able to connect Bluetooth and specific hardware and configure that hardware through IoT was important. And then also, since this was an existing project that we had to take over because the client who they were working with were not able to accomplish the results that they were looking for, we had to work with an existing code base that was challenging in a lot of ways because the code itself was not written very well, and it was not functioning, again, in the aspects that the client was expecting. So having to work with that and fix it was something that took a lot of time and effort from us in order to deliver it in the fashion that the client was looking for. And then we talked about the partnership and collaboration between the client and us was one part of the partnership, but also we had to work with a hardware company who was making that bioinstrument in order to understand how they were building this hardware, how they were sending the data information to the mobile application, and how the mobile application needed to interpret that, and what configuration changes we could make to the device in order to be more effective in showing the visualizations. So that collaboration and that discussion was very, very important, because without that collaboration, without that contribution between us and the hardware device company, the person who would struggle the most would be the client, because they weren't subject matter experts in either one of these fields. And it was important for all three of us to get alignments and be on the same page and actually support each other, rather than just throwing the ball in each other's court and trying to make it work. So what technologies did we use in this? So we built out native mobile applications and tablet applications. So this could be used on any mobile device, iOS or Android, whether that was a phone or a tablet. There was Bluetooth connectivity involved, where we were able to interface with the device and pull information from it and send information back to it. And then obviously the bioinformation hardware, via that Bluetooth, we were able to connect to it and capture data and capture signals to actually show on the mobile application.
So, Saif, maybe we can just pause here for a moment. For a lot of the folks that are listening in today, we've been talking a lot about cloud technologies, and that's very much been part of our Q3 strategy. Could you talk a little bit about why the cloud wasn't used within this project, or at least for the phase we work on?
So when it comes to cloud technologies, they're more of the server side, which means that if you need to do some sort of a remote background processing or need to hold information and things like that, you would want to use it over there. In this aspect, this was a very contained device and application where it was only between the patient and this device, and you needed in the moment feedback and all the data to be actually visualized, right? So there was no need to actually have internet connectivity or anything like that to make this application work, and that's why cloud wasn't necessarily a solution in the first version of this. But the future vision that they had around this project was being able to take that data and move it into a web portal, and from there being able to share it with doctors. That was their next business model, which was they wanted to go and sell packages. So they would go to a physiotherapist and say, okay, here's 50 devices for you. We'll give you access to a web portal. You share it with your patients. You share the device with your patients. And everything that they do on this device, you'll be able to see, and you'll be able to monitor their progress remotely without them having to come into the office. At that point, cloud technologies will become more relevant because now you're trying to centralize information across lots of patients and lots of devices, versus this one was very contained when we built the initial solution.
Thanks, Saif. That was great. Much appreciated. There was a question around that on Just Ask, so I thought it's timely that we answered that as we went through that. So.
Thank you. All right, so here's looking at the example screens again. So this was basically the initial version of what we saw in the video was the initial version. This was the version 2, where we also add a neuromuscular deficit test, which means that now, for example, if you had undergone a knee surgery and on one side, let's say your right side, and not on your left side, and now your right leg muscles needed to go through physiotherapy to actually recover their strength and recover their function, basically. So what you would be able to do is you would be able to connect this device to both your thighs, and from there you would be able to use the good leg to create a sort of a benchmark, saying, okay, when I flex my muscles on my left leg, these are the signal strengths that I get, and you can create a benchmark, and then you would do the exercise through your right leg, and then it would show you the gap. So that is basically the deficit, saying that, okay, between your good muscle and the muscle that needs recovery, here's the gap. And then it gives you sort of a benchmark to work towards and improve. And over a period of time, when you actually get to the point of full recovery, you can see how you're getting closer to that good muscle data that you had gotten originally.
So it's probably good that we just stop here for a moment and let maybe some of the creative folks or the TechX guys that weren't aware of this project, let them know that we didn't do any design work on this mobile application before there's any cringes or worrying. We were brought in, as Saif mentioned, to be a development partner for this client. We were asked to work on top of something that had been started, and the client didn't have any budget and was really interested in us fixing a lot of the technology problems and challenges they had. So whilst we did want to eventually get into doing more creative work and thinking about the user experience and interaction, our scope of work wasn't that. So for anyone asking questions about the designs or the UI, hopefully I've clarified that.
We actually cleaned up a little bit of the UI. It was worse when we got it. So we actually did some improvements to it and kept the budget minimal. And for the client, this was more, they treated this more as an MVP and something to prove within the market rather than it being a product that they're ready to launch and sell to hundreds and thousands of customers eventually. So that is why their emphasis was on getting the data right and the function right more than actually making the UI presentable to everybody. And
I think that's a really good point that you bring up, right? With a lot of the training and the changes we've been trying to promote within software, this client was very much more focused about outcomes and getting to market and doing field tests, right? So, sometimes when organizations are focused in those areas and they're thinking about value, they do look to minimize how much effort goes into design. And I know at times in other projects in the past, we've always had challenges around that. But with our values and our objectives, it's clear to see this client did prioritize different outcomes to creative and UX work, right?
Yeah, and then they were also looking at comparing themselves to other products that were similar but not exactly a competitor. There were some devices that are available that looked like all Nokia cell phones that were like bricks. So that is what they were competing against. So this was definitely much better than that in terms of interface, in terms of connecting to your mobile device and things like that. So with that, they were still ahead of what any of their competition would have come up with or would already be in the market. So for them, the priority was getting the data right, because what they wanted to prove to the customer, their patients, was that what you need to focus on is the growth, the improvement, and that is what their main goal was.
Awesome.
All right, so quick summary. So it was an IoT-based application. It worked on tablets and phones. And then it's basically a device that monitors electrical signals within the human body. So if you all didn't know that each muscle group, when it is contracted, it actually sends out a very, very small electrical signal that can be measured by a very sensitive electronic device. And then you can visualize that data. So that's basically what is happening over here. So if you see these pads over here, these pads are the ones that are catching that electrical signals and then sending it into that wire, and that wire is connected to the bioinstrumentation that's another company designed and created, and we are taking that information and then showing it on this tablet over here that you can see. So that is how this technology overall works. Patients can use this app anywhere, whether that is in the home or driving, or in the office, or in the actual doctor's office as well. It actually motivates the patients, so that way they can keep track of progress themselves. Every day they can see progress. Every day they can see how they're getting better. If they're not, they can change the way they're doing things to keep making that progress. It uses Bluetooth for data connectivity between the device and the application. And obviously the visual graphs are an indicator to help the user understand what's happening with those electrical signals, which we're translating into some sort of visual indicator that this is working, this is getting better. Because if we just showed them the voltage, the microvolts, I don't think it would make sense to them. So that was part of it, translating into something that a user would understand and be able to see what is happening with what they're trying to do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Thanks, Sai. I think if you want to skip ahead, so I think we're about halfway through in terms of time. We've completed about 80% of the presentation, but we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we faced in this project, and the real reason for that is for us to learn from those challenges and think about how we pursue business in the future. Some of those challenges are self-inflicted. There's things that we could have done better historically, and there always is. There's always room for improvement. But when it came to this project specifically, and when you're working with organizations that have existing technology or existing apps, or they've already funded someone to build some part of an MVP or a product, there will be challenges. Specifically, when we inherited the software code, we were told that the code needed some cleanup, the medical device worked well, and they needed someone to come in that had the reputation, the skill set to take them to a market launch. And once we started the engagement, and Sai can attest to this, and so can Honey and a few of the other team members, I think Abhinash and a few others are still here that worked on it. What we were told versus what we saw were two different things. Throughout the year that we worked with the client, we had a number of challenges. We had a number of bugs. We had to clean up the existing software code. As Saif touched on, we would test the product. The product would work fine. It wouldn't work in the field. Data signals would be up and down. And so I think the real learning, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but when you're working on top of somebody else's work, and when you're being told certain things, particularly about how other third parties have built maybe their devices or hardware, there needs to be a little more vetting, and there needs to be an engagement model in place that allows us to have some flexibility, because nothing's perfect and no one ever tells you the bad things. They'll just tell you what the good things are. I kind of alluded to this one as well, but given that the device was manufactured by a third party, our project success was intrinsically tied to multiple parties within the relationships. If the device had problems, or it was faulty, or it didn't have a long lifespan, the first time that we would hear about it, the client would talk about how the whole thing is not working. And even though we weren't responsible for the for the device, the fact that their product could not work in front of potential customers or patients really created challenges for us. And when we worked on this project, and when we think about other similar projects like this, whether it be in healthcare or not, there's a few things that will always pop up. Some will be more prevalent than others. But one thing that really happened in this project is it was a startup company. It was somebody else's idea. They were entrepreneurs, but they both had other jobs. So their ability to focus and give this project the amount of time that we would love for the client to give to it was definitely less than what we had hoped for. Closely tied to that, we had, when this project came on, it was 2017. We had, and start of 2018, we approached this client based on what they needed in terms of how long they had, how much money they had, and we had a fixed engagement. The reality is that if we were doing this over and over again, we would not have let the budget dictate what time or contract we had. That set us up for challenges, and those challenges are always very much tied to kind of working in an agile software development cycle. We were trying to fit everything into a square. We had fixed cost, fixed scope, fixed timeline. Those three factors don't go together as is. But when clients are then coming to you saying, I need this resolved, or they have new ideas, or they have bugs that come up that we're not planning for, it created a real ad hoc, challenging environment for the team to be successful, and obviously for our software to be successful with this client. A lot of bugs within the software, a lot of bugs within the hardware. So if we're working with projects like this or any other, even outside of the industry of healthcare, having those transparent conversations, doing the research, being able to investigate up front, being able to have an engagement model in place that allows for some variance and allows for a little extra time, or a methodology which, like, I think, a lot of the team has probably gone through a lot of training recently, being more focused on MVP and being more focused on outcomes, and having a working relationship where you can pivot. You don't have long review cycles. You don't have this long lead time to deliver something, breaking things down in small chunks and delivering regularly. On the flip side to that, as I mentioned earlier, you need to have a client that's completely bought in and invested into it. And I think a couple of years ago, that project, that client was not ready to be that type of client that we have today in other various projects. So big learning there. If we are taking a work on an existing software, existing code, as I said, getting under the hood, software spending a little bit of time understanding it, seeing how good, how bad, what type of effort's going to be needed. They are things we do today, but that is very important moving forward, even with other projects like this. And when a third party is involved and has their hands partly on the steering wheel, getting to a market launch and a successful product launch, building a relationship with those third parties that make sure that not only we are on the same page with the client, but the manufacturer of a device also needed to be on the same page. And I'm jumping a little bit ahead into lessons here as well, but these were all things that in hindsight, we were able to write these down and say project considerations. I think, Saif, you probably agree at that point in time when we took this project on, we probably didn't ask ourselves enough questions around these topics before we jumped into it. And it definitely created some hurdles for us.
Sure, yeah. And I think a big part of it was like, the way it was presented to us, like, okay, the code is not working, the hardware device is ready, and we need to just, fix the code. And it was very minimal from the effort standpoint. But then when you start looking into it after you run the project, that's when you start recognizing that there is a lot more to uncover over here and fix and, get right for the client to actually fully be able to use this application.
Yeah. And then additionally, so a few takeaways for you as we all go forward, and whether we're selling directly with a client, or part of a pursuit team, maybe we're not leading it, but we're supporting it, or if we're thinking about our marketing, there's a few things to take away from this. The relationships with third parties is key. Approaching things in a more MVP manner, being focused on regular deliverables and iterations and feedback. One of the biggest things here, I think, with mTrigger is that even though a lot of these things came to light in the project, we probably weren't strong enough or felt confident enough at that point in time to call out the challenges within the project, or really have a come to Jesus moment, so to speak. We let things kind of ponder along, and we did our best, and we delivered, and we got them to a point where they could start to explore a launch. But we never had that critical sit down to say, maybe it's time to look at how we do this differently, or maybe these couple of big issues need to be resolved in a very different way. There were attempts throughout the project through Project Manager. I know Saif was involved. We did some field testing, but really sitting down and being transparent and calling things a spade and re-pivoting approaches sometimes is needed. Saif touched on this a little bit, and to go into a bit more detail, we need to be making sure that if there are other parties involved, we are all aligned and all focused on serving the client in the same way and delivering the same types of outcomes. In this project, we had a software focus and the hardware company had the device focus. But in reality, if all parties aren't in sync, the person who loses out is the client. And when we work and we serve clients, if the client feels like they're not successful, and even though we're only part of the solution, we're responsible no matter which way you look at it. So it's our job to do the extra work if it's not happening, to really make sure that we are aligned with other partners. And there'll be times where clients need to have this discussion with them that maybe they need to do things with their other partners to help the overall project. But there are things that we can do. And some of those things mean having direct conversations, building a relationship, setting up and doing a little bit of extra meet and greets or time outside of a standard discovery phone call with a third party. We've struggled with the next one a lot.
Correct real quick.
Yeah.
So the multiple parties things also is that a lot. We've also come across this working on other projects as well, that sometimes we do encounter vendors of our clients who may not be thinking the same way we're thinking, or not have the same motivation that we have to get to what the end result of a usable product, right? So, and sometimes it's hard to educate them and train them and get them to understand it, collaborate in the same fashion. And that is where we may have to play a bigger role and actually help our client as well through education for the client, or changing our approach and our methodology to help get what we want, or what the client needs out of this other party as well for the product to be successful. Because this was a very good example of a project where the client was caught in between, finger pointing between us and the other third party. And when we started getting on the phone, that's when we quickly realized that they didn't want to contribute much more than what they were already doing. And then we had to change our ways of trying to get what we wanted of them in order for the client to be successful and helpful. And the client was a subject matter expert in either one of those fields, so they couldn't necessarily play a role in trying to help who should be doing what. So we kind of have to step in and do that. And we were late in it, but we recognized it, right? And I think that's going to be an important role as we meet newer clients who may have other partnerships or other things, who are partners who are involved in getting the end goals or getting the end results that they're looking for.
Yeah, really good point, Saif. You bring up a lot of things I think we could spend a lot more time on today. I think when we start the work, if we have other clients that are in this similar type of product business, it's pretty fair to assume that there's always going to be another third party. And I think if you haven't been involved in pursuits, or you're new to software, or you're new to working in the agency and you haven't experienced that, the reality is as soon as there's more than two parties in a relationship, it gets intrinsically more difficult. There's more people, there's more personal agendas, there's politics. As Saif mentioned, maybe there's different reasons why people are not aligned. Maybe they don't want to do any extra work because they have a bad contract and they don't feel they're getting paid enough. There's so many different reasons where this can go amiss, and it's really important that moving forward, we take the time to build those relationships. And if the relationships aren't where we need to be, we look at ways to make them better to serve our clients. And I was going to touch on this one. Chris always talks about this a lot, but how you start is how you end. As we talked about, 2017, 2018, we were a different business to what we were last year or this year. But how we set projects up really has a long-lasting effect on how we work with people. And we probably underestimated the impacts of having a third party involved. We definitely had to take on a lot more work than we had anticipated. We saw a lot more problems with the device, and our app obviously had to connect to that. So upfront setup, transparency, having the hard conversations, leveraging our experiences in our past projects to talk about the realities of these types of projects and the issues that can arise. If we have clients coming in saying it's going to be perfect, it's going to be easy, they've never probably done a technology project. So showcasing our prowess and our experience. Something that's also kind of at times can bring endearment to software is not only talking about our successes, but also talking about the failures in projects. Clients like to feel comfortable. They like to feel like they've got someone that can help them solve problems. And even when you have a bad experience in a project, it's not so much about what happened, it's how did you respond to that problem. And clients, as I said, they're looking for problem solvers. So when we set up and we align and we talk about the risk and how we mitigate those risks and how we're all reliant and dependent on each other, when you start to have those kinds of conversations, you can start to bring alignment and a real team camaraderie or morale into projects immediately. And that's not easy, but it does have a long-lasting payoff if we can do it. And that this is a good project where if we had our time over again, we probably would have spent a little bit more time on that. We would have done a bunch of other things differently too, but that's always the case with a lot of projects. That was something, a real big takeaway for the team from memory. Additionally, a couple other learnings just around like the project. We talked a little bit about assumptions. Trust but verify is a term you hear a lot. Probably needed to do a little more verifying, a little more testing on their device. Different clients operate in different ways. We knew that this company was a smaller company. We knew they had day jobs with other organizations. We knew that this was a passion, innovative type project that they were looking at on the side. Entrepreneurs do business very differently to people that work in a corporate environment. They have different types of expectations. They have different needs. If they're short on time, they don't want to give you extra time. In a corporate type project, they've got more time than an entrepreneur does. Maybe they're not running other business on the side. So being aware of the types of clients that we're dealing with up front and catering not only how we can work with them to suit them, but just also being aware about the risk or the structure or the things that we need to do, particularly up front, or checkpoints, or having them involved to make the project successful, was a big learning. And then something that when we were preparing for this, Saif mentioned, which I totally forgot about until he brought it up, the theoretical versus the practical experience or understanding component to this project was key. We took the project on. We knew we could solve their problems. We knew we could work on source code that needed to be improved. We've built hundreds of mobile apps, but how much do we really know about exercise science and electrical currents and voltage that muscles generate and things like that? We pride ourselves at Softway on understanding people's businesses or taking the time to and being good problem solvers. But this was a project where, just from listening to Saif talk to you about some of the science behind this, it's not something that we talk about every day or something that we didn't really study when we went to school or college. And so taking the time to really understanding the practical side of this application, how it worked in the field, what issues they were facing even before Softway came into the picture, we could have definitely done more work there to help us and in turn help the client. And then last but not least, something else Saif touched on with me in just kind of a one-on-one preparing for this was we had built, the entrepreneurs were following what was going on in the market and had a need to build this, and they thought it was a great opportunity. They went and built the product thinking about competition and not necessarily the users. And so I overemphasize it here, but not for a bad purpose. We focus on user-centered design. We have a large TechX group. We really think that understanding the experience and doing the research helps drive the success of a project. Unfortunately, in this project, we didn't really have a lot of UX support. And mainly it wasn't probably because we didn't want to. It was more a budget and financial thing for the client. That said, if we're consulting and advising clients that are designing products, users must be involved in some of that upfront work. And as the product is working towards an MVP approach, not only should they just be there contracting muscles and showing you how their muscles are improving, but they should probably be consulted on the upfront stuff to make sure that the interface of the application works well, that it makes sense to them, that it's not confusing, that it's easy to use. All of those factors we talk about when we do those types of services were probably missed, and we took it for granted that that wouldn't have as much of a problem. But we should be always encouraging customers to think about users over other things. So with that said, we have about 10 minutes left, and there are some questions coming through. I want to just touch on a little bit, how does this help promote, market, and sell Softway? And feel free to, we should be wrapped up before the end, before 12:30, but feel free to drop any other questions you have after this. But when it comes to how this project helps Softway, there's a couple of things that immediately come to my mind. One, it's a great product and application to talk about in terms of our experience within and around the healthcare and patient experience. We learn a lot. We're able to learn a lot about science and biofeedback. We're able to learn about Bluetooth. We're able to increase our capability around mobile application development and modern technologies, specifically IoT applications. And since then, we've heard through other Sales Up series, we've worked on a number of other IoT apps. The explosion of IoT, it hasn't slowed down. So we have a real good working example here to say what work have we done in healthcare. We have a really good project here that talks about patient experience. It talks about IoT mobile applications. It talks about digital transformation. And that can apply to not just the healthcare spectrum, but can apply anywhere, really. If you're working with people that are working in the mines that need a field-based application, we can build IoT apps. If we're working with Goodman or manufacturers that need to put apps in the hands of workers, they're using Bluetooth and IoT to access information out in the field. If we're trying to control devices that do something for someone inside of a house, like a thermostat, like an electrical product, things like that, we've built really good capability through this and other projects that sets us up well to have conversations about our IoT and connected application capabilities. So if anything you want to add to that?
No, nothing to add, Rick. I think we can dive into questions because of time, I think.
Yeah. So moving over to the questions. So why don't we work with mTrigger today? Good question. So at that point in time in early 2018, we had some decisions to make as a business. I touched on a lot of the challenges that we had with the client, and we were having concerns about the client's commitment and the amount of time that they could invest in this business. And also, some of those challenges around the existing hardware continued to rear their head. When we talked about budgets and the reality of what was needed to really help them go to the next level, which was a full product launch and really them getting out there to sell it to thousands of therapists, things broke down all to the point where we decided that this was going to have an opportunity cost for the business. Whilst we are passionate about the project and we love it, at that point in time, it was taking us away from other technology projects and other projects at Softway, where our energy was being spent elsewhere on this project rather than elsewhere. So we amicably decided that it was not going to be the right thing, that we would continue to be their partner based on budgets and really the client. So the next question that's tied probably close to that, we don't have an ongoing relationship with mTrigger right now. So for the question about how they're doing in terms of market penetration today, and have they reached out to us for any further development, unfortunately, they have not. I think we would definitely be considerate of things, and we'd love to see how they're going. Saif and I were actually talking about some of our recent marketing efforts and reaching back out to past customers. We will be reaching out back to mTrigger just to connect with them and see how they're doing. We don't have any stats on how many units have sold and how far they've penetrated the market so far. Question, was this our first IoT health-related project that we did, and what were our learnings? Saif, from memory, I know we've worked on some other healthcare applications with the Texas Heart Institute, but I do believe this was our first IoT health-related project.
Actually, a second. Before that, we did something called SwitchIt, which was a company that makes electronic wheelchairs that they wanted to interface with a mobile phone for diagnostic purposes. So we built an application for that as well. So that was our first IoT-based medical application, and this was the second.
I totally forgot that we did. I thought mTrigger came first, but yeah, you're right. When it comes to learnings, Saif, like if there's 3 takeaways that you personally have as the head of our technology group here at Softway, what learnings do you have for people that are maybe tuned in today or might be working on a project like this in the future?
I think it's when it comes to hardware integration, it's not as straightforward as it may sound initially, right? A lot of the time it's like, we have this device, we have this mobile application that we need for it, connect them together, and let's get it to work. When we actually get into the physical, connectivity and actually making it work and putting the solution together, there's a lot of variables that happen. Just because it is supposed to work that way, it's not going to work that way. And the time that we've allocated to it from a delivery standpoint or from an effort standpoint may vary because of that. So keep that in mind. The more questions we ask, the more details that we have, and the more experimentation we do, hands-on research that we do on this, the more successful we'll be at trying to get to the end result. So that would be one big thing that I want to share. The other is that when it comes to IoT-related devices and things like that, most client contacts aren't very knowledgeable. That is why they come to a company like Softway, right? And at that point, we also may not be very knowledgeable because their industry is different and the applications that we've done in the past may not be directly relevant, but the concept is similar, right? So they're looking to us to be the experts and to help them through it. One thing that I can confidently say about our team is that even if we don't know how to do that today, tomorrow we'll find out how to do it and we'll make it work, right? That's the ability that we have and that's the confidence that we have. So having that confidence and being able to project that to our clients and walking them through it and helping them realize and helping them through this, I think is going to be very important for them to continue having faith in software. So those are the two takeaways that I have that I think really stand out to me from all of our past engagements and experiences that I think I would like to share with our team.
Thanks, Saif. A couple other questions here before we wrap up. So would mTrigger give us a good review or referral? Good question. We technically did walk away from that engagement. I think the answer is to be determined. We will be reaching out to them in the not too distant future just to check in and see how they're doing. And that question will be asked. So we'll keep you posted on if they want to. We'll be checking in to see how they're doing as well. And if there's any potential to do work, I think we would consider it with everything going on in 2020.
Sorry, one of the the owners, basically Russ, he was actually very appreciative of what software did. And he liked everything that we were able to do and how much effort and how engaged we were into this. So, when we parted ways, I don't think there was any ill intentions towards each other in that. So that I would like to say that at least he would give us a good review or a referral if we needed to. I don't know, Brian.
Another question here from Robin. Hi, Robin. So for anyone that would like to use this app, how can we find it? Good question. So at the point in time when we wrapped up our engagement with them, they weren't selling the product publicly. It was a trial that was being used with certain therapists. However, in recently looking at their website, they are retailing the unit and selling it to the public. An individual unit costs about $400 retail. What I will do, Robin, for you is I might actually reach out to the client and just say, hey, hope things have been going well. Is there a wholesale rate or a software maybe discount? And I'll introduce you into them. And if you want to ask them any questions, you can chat with Amy, who's the project manager over there. How did mTrigger hear about Softway? They reached out. It was like 4 years ago today. Saif, you're probably better placed to answer this one than me, but I have a feeling it was SEO. Do you remember?
I think it was SEO. It was not. Nobody referred them to us or anything like that. I think they just.
I can recall. It definitely was a referral. We weren't really doing any other PR. We didn't have any other health clients, projects that had gone live at that stage. I think it was definitely SEO. So for everyone that's working on marketing right now, SEO generated a lot of project opportunities for Softway. And I'd say particularly a lot of technology projects that we either still have a relationship today with a client or ongoing retainers that have been for a number of years now have come through SEO. That looks like all of our questions today. Thank you for everyone that's joined in. We hope this has been informative and valuable. Saif, I know you were asked to step up and talk a little bit about mTrigger with late notice, so thank you for that. I know you're a busy man. It's always good to rehash some of our projects and remember all the things that we've done that maybe we don't always talk about or we forget the good stuff that we've done. So thanks for your help. And for next week, guys, please join us 2 weeks from now. We'll be talking about a project that ties into digital transformation for ExxonMobil called Architect the Core. So thanks for joining, Saif. Appreciate your time, mate. Thanks for your help. And we'll wrap up. Hope everyone has a great day.